Hey guys, exciting week this week. We're going to finish the Crucible, which has, I think, a little bit of a shocking ending, so that's always fun. I had someone in Blended tell me that they had heard from people in class that I give more of a recap and wanted me to do a video. So that is why I'm going to do a little recap of the Crucible kind of so far to help understanding for those who haven't been in class. So the big thing that I want you to kind of think about and understand is going to be to help with the essay. And that's what we'll do next week is we'll start writing your essay. So in Act 4, you'll kind of see Reverend Hale, right, that we know at this point has denounced the court. He kind of come back to counsel people to confess, right? So he's like, even though it's a lie, he's trying to get people to confess because he thinks a lie is less of a sin than those who are just going to throw their life away. And so that's kind of what your essay is going to be about, is you're going to answer, is it better to lie to save a life, or is it better to die for a principle belief? Okay, and I want you're only going to use the Crucible as your evidence. So the easiest way that I think to do it is just to use what characters did, right? So you're using specific characters and their actions as your evidence to support your thesis, right? So your thesis will be which side of that question you lie on. So that's kind of what, as I'm going over a quick little recap of the Crucible, that's what I'm going to focus in on and what I want you to kind of think about too. Okay. So remember in Act 1, right, you have Abigail, who's kind of always lying to save herself, right? She originally tells her uncle they were just dancing in the forest. Then when it comes out that Ann Putnam had sent Ruth to conjure spirits, Abigail lies, oh, well, they were conjuring spirits, it wasn't me. And then, we find out that it was all Abigail. She was the one trying to, do some charm to kill Elizabeth Proctor and all that stuff. But she kind of lies when Reverend Hale comes and Tituba's like, it was, Abby who wanted me to do this. Abigail then throws Tituba under the bus, right, and says, no, Tituba, she's the one. She's bewitched me. She makes me laugh during church and prayers and all that kind of stuff, right? To the point where Tituba then she's the first one that really has to make the decision if she's going to lie or allow herself to be killed, right? Because at the end of Act 1, when they're questioning Tituba, it's like, we're going to go whip you, we're going to kill you unless you confess to kind of what you've been doing, that you've been doing witchcraft, that you've worked with the devil, that kind of stuff, right? So Tituba kind of has to make that decision. Is she going to lie, or is she going to confess to something that's not true? And she makes that decision that she's going to confess, right? Yes, I did, I signed the devil's book or whatever. But that wasn't enough, right? They wanted her to actually give names of who else, right? So she's like, yep, this person. And that's when we see Abigail first decide, hey, maybe this could work out in my favor. And she also, then confesses to witchcraft and, signing the devil's book. And now, though, she's going to be good and all that kind of stuff, right? So then as we go into Act 2, we see kind of the disparity between Elizabeth and John and kind of what is happening within their relationship. John says that he confessed to Elizabeth about the affair with Abigail, and that seems to what some strain is. And this is really important because it goes a lot into Act 4. Elizabeth is kind of like, I'm not the one who's judging you, right? You're the one that's judging yourself. And John, no, it's you. I can't go here to there without you, accusing me of things. And Elizabeth's kind of like, no, like that's not what's happening. This is like you're judging yourself type of a thing. But it to the point, where he's not willing at this point to go against Abigail or to say what happened. Because it seems like, one, he doesn't have proof, right? And from what they're saying, Abigail's, been treated like the saint in the town. She's the one saving them, exposing all this horrible witchcraft that's been going on. So he doesn't have any proof. And then you kind of wonder, okay, does he still kind of have feelings for Abigail? But then when we get to the point where Elizabeth now has been mentioned in court, right? So Mary comes home. She says she's been mentioned in court. Elizabeth knows it's because of Abigail, right? That Abigail's whole goal is to kill Elizabeth so she can have John to herself, right? And she kind of tells John that, and John's just like, no way, that's what's going on. It's not happening, okay? But then at the end of Act 2, right, when you have the marshals come, Abigail's been stabbed with a needle. She saw Elizabeth's spirit as the one to stab the needle into her. So they're, looking for that doll. They find the doll. They say it was Mary. They were like, Mary, are you really true? This is all your memory? Like, what if, Elizabeth has bewitched you to think you made this doll and it was really Elizabeth, right? So all this kind of stuff, to the point where Elizabeth's like, Abigail, it's all Abigail. She should be ripped from the world, which of course doesn't look good if Abigail was just stabbed and they're accusing Elizabeth of doing it. So anyways, Elizabeth gets taken to prison along with Martha Corey and Rebecca Nurse, right? So these are prominent women in the town. And up until this point, the people who've been accused have been like the town drunk or people that are homeless and beggars, people that people wouldn't mind being hanged, or they find it really easy to believe that, yeah, they could be associated with witchcraft. But now you kind of have these prominent women, so it kind of changes the game at this point. But when Mary kind of talks about what was going on in court, she explains that there have been people who have been confessing, right? So they're kind of the exact same situation that Tituba was in at the very beginning. In this court, it's kind of like confess to witchcraft or you're going to be sentenced to be hanged. So you have these people who are confessing, right? Because they don't want to be hanged. But what happens when they confess is they're now legitimizing the whole process, right? Obviously, there is witchcraft going on. We have people that are confessing to it. So it's kind of them trying to save their lives is now making it so other people have to make that same choice, right? So anyways, so the Act 2 ends with John kind of vowing that he's going to go to court. He's going to save his wife. He says, Mary, you're going to go with me. Mary then says, Abigail will accuse you of adultery. John's like, oh, she told you. Well, fine, whatever. If that has to come out, that's whatever. My wife's not going to kind of pay for my sin. But remember that it's not just because, right, their government is based on religion, right? So even though it's, like the bigger picture of a sin with him committing this adultery, it's also against the law. So it's not just like if this affair comes out, it's not just, oh, John's this horrible person, everyone's going to judge him, and, he's going to be excommunicated from the church. No, it's like he will go to prison, right? He broke a law. So it is a big deal if that affair comes out because John will go to prison. So anyways, that's kind of how Act 2 ends. So Act 3, we kind of get to go in the court. We see that these men have been trying to go to court and they're, the court hasn't seen them. So finally they just kind of barge into court. And the judge kind of shuts down court. He doesn't really want this done in front of the public, and he brings them to this back room, right? And then the men start to lay this defense for their wives. And first you have Francis Nurse, and and he has this petition from 90, I can't remember the exact number, but all these neighbors who are vouching for Rebecca, right? And they're all saying she's amazing. And remember, Rebecca is like so saint-like, Christian, great person, does all the service. People know about her in different towns. Like, she's just really well known and beloved. But when they give this, this list, this petition of names of people vouching for Rebecca, the judge then sends out warrants for all these people. Like, well, if they're, they must be caught up in this too, and now Francis feels awful because he's like, I just brought this all on my neighbors, they were just trying to be good for my wife, and now they're going to have to kind of answer to the court. So he feels really bad. So then Giles Corey kind of gives his evidence, and he's like, well, a good man overheard Thomas Putnam saying he put his daughter up to accusing George Jacobs of witchcraft because he wanted to buy the land. And they're like, okay, well, who's this guy who overheard it? And Giles Corey, he just watched 90 warrants be served for the people that vouched for Rebecca Nurse. So he's like, I'm not telling you who it is. So they're like, hey, well, you're going to be thrown in contempt of court then if you're not going to tell us. So now you have warrants drawn up for the other people. You have Giles Corey is now arrested in contempt of court because he won't give up his source because he wants to protect them. And now you're kind of left with John Proctor, right? And John Proctor's evidence is Mary, right? And he said Mary's going to say that they were all pretending, there's no such thing as witchcraft, type of thing. And they're kind of like, well, why are you here, John? Like, what's your actual thing, right? Because you have Reverend Parrish. It's like, he's only here to overthrow the court. He hates me. He's just being contentious. And he's like, no, I'm here to save my wife. And they're like, hey, well, as it turns out, your wife has claimed to be pregnant, which is news to John. He didn't know she's pregnant, but he's like, if she says she's pregnant, right? This is the most honest woman ever. If she says that she's pregnant, she is pregnant. So they're like, all right, well, she's saved for at least 9 months. So you don't need to do anything else here. So are you going to leave the court now? And John's looking at Giles and Francis. He's like, well, no, because it affects more people kind of than just my wife, and that seems to give the evidence that he really is trying to overthrow the court. It's not just that he's protecting his wife, right? So then they start questioning Mary, and she's saying, yep, it was all pretend, all this stuff. And she never, was ever afflicted by witchcraft. She doesn't know anyone who actually did witchcraft, even though she'd been a part of this group of girls that were doing the, accusing and had been, they talked the girls fainted in court and they've been attacked and they've been turned ice cold and all this kind of stuff. So to kind of prove it, they're like, all right, Mary, well, faint right now. Like, if you were pretending and just fainted in court, faint right now. And Mary's like, and she can't do it. And she's like, when you're in this group of girls and we're all together, you kind of get this feeling and it's easy to go along with it. But when she's just alone, she can't. And they're like, well, is it because you're not actually being attacked by a witch and that's why you can't do it? And then Abigail kind of turns on Mary. They bring in the girls. Now they bring in Abigail and the other girls to hear Mary kind of accuse them, and they kind of turn on Mary a little bit to the point where John's like, Abigail is, lying. And they're kind of like, why would Abigail do this? So finally John says, she's a whore is what he's saying, right? They're like, well, how do you know she's a whore? And he kind of confesses to this affair. Okay. All right, I'm almost out of time on this video, so I will do a part 2 to just wrap up really quick. Sorry this is taking a little long, but hopefully it's helping you kind of understand what's going on.